Hello. Thank you guys for coming out on such an inclement weather night and sharing the film with us. I'm Lisa Jackson. I'm the director, producer, writer-ish, except for Wilfred's Benmore. This is Wilfred Buck. And this is Ben Weiss, who's joining us from MIT, head of Planetary Sciences, and also a specialist in meteorites, which is how we first connected. So I feel like you just had a long introduction. Maybe what I'll do is I'll introduce myself like slightly longer, and then you could introduce yourself slightly longer, and then we'll start a conversation just so you have a tiny bit more context. So I am mixed settler on my father's side and Anishinaabe on my mother's side, from a place called Aamjiwnaang, which is near Sarnia, Ontario, which is near Detroit, but on the Canadian side. I've been a filmmaker for about 20 years. I live in Toronto. My mother was a residential school survivor, and most of my film work has been around Indigenous subject matter, but I have been known for cross-genre stuff. So I've done 2 VRs, a big multimedia installation, and then most of my documentaries kind of are, you know, a little bit of everything thrown in, including like an IMAX film about lichen. So I kind of I don't have a lane to stay in. I sort of go where I choose to. And I should say this film, I'm not going to get into it now, but usually we're not going to do a Q&A. I will tell you how I came to do the film about Wilfred, which is often what people want to know, but I can tell you about that later. But Wilfred and I connected, I think, in early 2018, and then the film came out in 2024. So we spent a fair bit of time working on it. I think his family was tired of the cameras by the end. And the film is almost a year now since it's premiered. So and maybe Ben, I'll hand it to you to introduce yourself a little bit more.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. My name is Ben Weiss, and I work at MIT in Planetary Science. I'm a scientist, and I've always just been interested in space and beyond just the science aspect of it. It just, it's something that's drawn me since I've been a kid. I've been at MIT since 2004, and I started out working on samples, studying them in the laboratory from other planets. And, we've been interested in how planets form and evolve and whether they're habitable. And I have also, in more recent years, started working on spacecraft missions. So I'm involved in the Mars rover that's driving around right now up there. And we have launched a spacecraft to this asteroid named Psyche, which is the largest metal object in the solar system. So it's on its way there, and it'll arrive there in 2029. So I'm the deputy principal investigator for that. And a bunch of other things: Europa Clipper, Ocean Worlds. Like Lisa, I love to just do things, follow my curiosity, and I've been lucky enough to do that. The way I met Lisa was, I think you were at MIT at the time.
I was a fellow, but during COVID, so that meant Zoom.
Yeah, I've now spent more time with Lisa in this auditorium than I have since I've known her. We spent a lot of time talking about this film on Zoom, and it was really a great opportunity to learn about all the fantastic stuff you're doing, Wilfred. So anyway, happy to be here.
Thank you, Ben. Can I start? I'm sort of the moderator and a participant, so it's like an interesting 2 hats. Can I put you on the spot, Ben, and ask you to respond to the film? And I can leave it completely up to you, but if you're looking for some guidance, I'm kind of curious about maybe what Andre Uhl said about, there being a relationship in terms of how we look at science, and what Wilfred said as well in the Harvard sequence, which is that everyone comes to knowledge, but it may look very different.
Yeah, so actually, I would say one of the things that really resonated with me was his statement. We're immersed in the universe, and the universe is immersed in us. And I have to say, much to like the annoyance of a lot of my fellow scientists, I've long thought that science, while extremely powerful, can't possibly be a complete description of the universe. And that's not to diss it. It's had enormous predictive power, and we fly planes with it, and we're here watching a film with it. But it's only been around for maybe at most 1% of human history, and so it seems unlikely that we would just happen to be alive at the time when we've reached a complete description of the universe. And I don't just mean that if we just do a little more research, we'll cure cancer, or it's just a matter of following deeper research with like more data and more computational power. What I'm talking about is I just think that it's that there are certain things that I guess what got me to this thinking was that, and a lot of these themes come up in the film, is there's a lot of things that we see and feel that as humans that just simply don't make sense from a rational perspective, and I don't see how science can be a description of this. And the two things I always think of, and you'll if you think about the film, you'll see that this comes up over and over again, is one, where did the universe come from? It's just simply irrational that it could come from nothing, but at the same time, that leaves you with the alternative that it's been here forever, and both of these things make no sense. And we live with them every single day, right? And then the other thing is consciousness or awareness. Why does it? Maybe you hear that if you can build a sufficiently complex machine, that you'll hear people say that it becomes aware. But what I don't understand is rationally how I have a view onto the universe from something inside me, and that I don't see how that's something that can be described by science. And I'm sure if you think about this, you'll find other examples in your own personal life. So that just tells me that that there's something deeper here. And again, coming back to some of the things you heard in the film and that Wilfred's been saying, I think that it doesn't make sense that and this is really going to, a lot of people think this is crazy, that that awareness is restricted to just higher beings. It seems to me that to living things that that there must be some kind of quantized division between basically inanimate matter and matter. So I don't want to say anything more precise than that because I don't understand it. But I think that's sort of what you're hearing here, is that we emerge from the universe, and the kind of the universe emerges from us, and that was I thought a very powerful moment in the film.
Awesome. I'm curious, Wilfred, if you want to say anything about that.
No. In the last little while, I've been. I was avid a player in Facebook for quite a while. Then I signed myself out, and I just before I came here, I reinstated myself into Facebook, and this thing about AI always comes up all the time, wherever you go, whatever you listen to. And one of the things that got me wondering about that was they're talking about, like our guest here was saying, was about a machine that has a sentiency that is becomes aware. And it got me to thinking, So here we go again. And we're talking about materialism. We're talking about ownership. We're talking about slavery. And that's what I can see coming. You know, if there is beings that are sentient, and there's going to be questions about ownership, and there's going to be questions about who's the master and who's not, and it's the whole process over again, just like the concept of going to Mars. Again, when we go to Mars, are we taking all this crap and bullshit that we have here over there and do the same thing over there? And so we have to think about these things, and we have to think about the understanding that everything and anything is connected. And our elders have always told us that. Everything is connected. Everything is intertwined. Everything is entangled. And there's repercussions, there's reverberations, there's ripples, there's consequences, and there's responsibility that goes with that. And so we can't be passive observers. We can't see the world. We occupy this reality. And just by being, just from my mere presence in this reality, I have a part to play, just as everybody else does here. And so our elders have always told us that whatever we do, we're entangled. And so when they told me that we are part of this reality, and this reality is part of us, and science goes on to say that even the neutrinos that emerge from stars, they're inside of us. They're part of us. Though they may change a bit as they pass through our atmosphere or as they emerge from the sun, they are still part of us, and we are part of them. And that's entanglement. And we're connected. And in that connection, do we take responsibility or do we ignore it and try to think of ourselves as the apex of knowledge, the apex of of everything, and we understand everything, when we don't. Our elders always say, we just know very, very little. The concept they use is matutsan, the sweat lodge. You have a domed lodge, and they say you're sitting in that dome lodge, and you're in your ceremony, but that dome lodge is not a dome; it's a sphere. You're sitting inside a sphere. And the top you're sitting is the known, your reality that you know, that you see, that you touch, that you interact with. But there's another half of that reality that you don't know, that you don't see, that you don't touch, but it's there. It's there. And understand that it's there, and we'll never know we'll never know about that. But we'll know very little. And maybe at some point we'll be ready to know a little more. And that's the whole process of our elders saying, as our Lakota friend over there, he'd say, malaye, nitamagiin. I know nothing, I'm pitiful. And when you put yourself in that perspective, that is like Dr. Leroy Ilbear was saying there, then you empty your cup, you empty your big head. And so put more thing in there, more perspective, new understandings. And that's what our elders always said. Ceremony is the center of everything. Ceremony, with everything that you do, ceremony has to begin with it. You have to begin with ceremony. Because if you don't, you go in there with a sense in your head saying, okay, I'm the expert in this field and I know everything. So ask me anything and I'll tell you. And you just shut yourself off from how many people here. That's how many perspectives you shut yourself off from. So my elders have always said, ceremony is key to us keeping ourselves who we are. Nitamagian, we are pitiful.
Thank you.
Mic drop from Wilfred. Nitamagian. I was telling people about that. The word pitiful in English doesn't, people don't like that so much, but I've explained that very thing. Okay, for something a little bit different, I am going to tell you how I came to do this film, but then we're going to get back to this conversation, which is very interesting because I feel like a lot of people may ask me that in the lobby. By the way, if people have questions, can hang out in the lobby a little bit afterwards because we're not going to do a Q&A. it's kind of interesting because it goes to like things are greater than what you might expect. So I have this thing where every so often, it's quite rare. There's maybe been 4 or 5 in my life where as a filmmaker, and it's interesting, I became a filmmaker in 2004, so just as long as you've been at MIT. My first film came out then. But I would get these occasional, what I call a zap. And when I get it, it's just honestly like, now it's just like I feel like something is like, you're going to do this. And so when I first, in 2017 in the fall, I was at the University of Toronto at a Star Knowledge small gathering. There was a panel kind of like this, and I was watching it. And then I was talking to some people afterwards, and they said, oh, we're actually having this very small little conference, Indigenous Star Knowledge. It's not for the public. But I asked if I could crash the next morning, and they said, okay. And so I went. And then this man from Ottawa mentioned Wilfred's name and said, I shouldn't be here presenting. Wilfred Buck should be presenting. And I hadn't heard of Wilfred. But when I heard his name, this voice in my head said, someone has to make a film about Wilfred Buck. and I didn't even think it was me. But the thing is, when I get the zap, and I've never talked about them prior to this, but I've started talking about it with this film, is like, it's just like this bolt of fascination and just kind of like urgency. Like, okay, I have to do this thing. And so I ran up to the guy in the break and I was like, can you put me in touch with Wilfred Buck? And someone has to make a film on him. And so then probably a month or 2 later, we connected by phone, and Wilfred kindly said, well, I've just finished writing my life story and I can email it to you. And he sent it to me, and the very first page I read, and I was like, whoa, this writing is incredible. And then the summer prior to that, I'd been reading, and I know I said I didn't have a lot of zaps, but I had been reading a book, and I saw the word sturgeon, which I had seen before, and I got this zap, and I was like, suddenly like Googling sturgeon. What's the story with sturgeon? And I just became instantly fascinated. And at the time I was finishing this virtual reality piece called Badab, and I'm like, we got to do an animated sturgeon in the river. And they're like, no, it's too late and you can't. And I was like, okay. And then I got to the last page of Wilfred's memoir, which is amazing, by the way, and for sale. In the world now, and it was the Sturgeon Star constellation, and so that's when I was like, okay, maybe I'll be the filmmaker to make this, and then I'm just going to talk a little bit more, and then we're going to get back to the kind of more interesting stuff, in my opinion, which is that when I approached Wilfred and I asked him about potentially starting a film about his life, he said, well, why don't you come to the Sundance next summer up in northern Manitoba, and we'll talk after that. And so my producer, Alicia Smith, and I, she's from the NFB, who's a co-producer on the film, we went up and we helped out for 6 days. And I totally understood why Wilfred had said that, because maybe you get a tiny sliver of it in the film, but I felt like I went to the Harvard of Indigenous knowledge. And to see a whole community operating on the kind of value systems and the knowledge of this way of being, it was so radically different, and it just really opened my eyes and set me on the right path. And so that's what I'll say about the film. And then just a quick 6 years later, it was done. Actually, the one thing I want to say, and I'm curious if either or hopefully both of you wanted to say something. So when I was starting to make this film, I thought, now COVID interrupted, so that was a bit of a wrench in a lot of things. But I thought, we'll part of the film will document a dialogue between Western science and Indigenous science, Indigenous knowledge, and we can start to have a conversation, because these aren't two like they're both describing the world through different perspectives. But I actually found, a couple of times that there were folks that were like, if I don't actually have the vocabulary to, like, I don't disbelieve, and I'm sure a lot of scientists think whatever they think about Indigenous scientists or Indigenous science and knowledge, but some were like, I actually just don't know how have a shared conversation on this topic. And so then I started to say, I hope that this film, Wilfred Buck, can be an invitation for that dialogue to begin. So now I'm going to stop talking, and I'm curious if either or both of you want to talk to that.
Okay, well, one of the things that, well, a couple of things. One was, I'm an educator by profession, and back in, I think it was 96 or 97, I was teaching at a high school, teaching math and science at this high school. It's this Indigenous-based high school in the city of Winnipeg called Children of Reared High School. And I took these students to a conference. And of course, at the conference, I didn't spend much time in any of the workshops. I was too busy running up and down the halls chasing kids around. But anyways, I went running past this one room, and the door was open. And I just happened to overhear somebody was speaking, and they were talking about dreams, and they were talking about the stars, and then they were also talking about infinite possibility. And I stopped, and I listened, and they were using Indigenous perspective as it applied to a concept of science, and that's the very first time I've ever heard that. And so I sat there and I listened, and that got me interested in the stars, learning about the stars, because what that person was saying was exactly what the elders were saying. But I was listening at it through a Western paradigm as well, rather than just the Indigenous paradigm. And so we started making connections. And this man is from Entanglement, by the way. Oh. And his name was Opaskwayak, and he just happens to be Aamjiwnaang, the premier of Manitoba, his father. And anyway, so that what got me interested in learning about the connection that there is, and there's so much connections there. You just got to look at it through a different perspective, and how certain principles apply, and how they fit together. And one of the people that really changed my perspective on the two is a lady Kim Ben, Dr. Kim Ben from University of Victoria. She came to a sweat lodge with us, and she I don't think she really wanted to come. I invited her. And she said, "Wow, okay."
No, she did want to go. She was just very nervous.
Yeah, before the sweat lodge, she came up to me. She said, I didn't really want to come, but I feel very uncomfortable, out of place, and I'm very hesitant and very worried about any organized religion. And but I'll attend your sweat lodge just to respect your invitation. So she came to the sweat lodge. And after the sweat lodge was over, she came back to me and she said, this isn't what I expected at all. You didn't talk about God, you didn't talk about heaven or hell, you didn't talk anything about that. What you talked about was something that I could understand. What you talked about was something that I have experience with, and that's energy, and that's particles. And you were talking about that, and I feel very comfortable, and I want to come back to a ceremony. And that made me think more. Well, there's these connections here. We just have to straighten them out, and we have to get them to a wider audience so other people start understanding that there are connections, and the concepts that my people have and hold for thousands and thousands of years are just viable right now as they were thousands and thousands of years ago, and even more so because they're making more connections with the wider world out there and a different perspective that everybody holds.
I would just say briefly that the idea, the great analogy at the end of the film where you have to basically not have a full cup in order to learn something. I feel like I've learned that in my own sort of work over and over again. It started when I was a graduate student and I had to take my general's exam for being admitted to candidacy for a PhD. And to make a long story short, I went in there and it was almost total disaster. And the problem was that I did barely pass, but the problem was that they asked me some questions and I had not learned yet what is now I realize is like a key skill for being a scientist, which is to understand when you don't understand something and to be aware of that. Because until you get to that point, you can't really be open to learning something new and to teaching yourself. So, and that really, you won't realize that until someone asks you a question, and then you realize you can't answer, or you think you know the answer, which is also part of my problem in the exam. So yeah, I really think, you know, like broadly a key skill for a scientist, and then it goes, you know, beyond this, of course, as a human, is to really understand when you don't understand something. That's something I tried to like teach my students also, to you know, have an awareness that actually, you know, on multiple levels that they have something about a particular problem that they haven't solved, and they don't know how to solve it. And then I'd just say one other thing randomly, which is, I think, although I'm not at all an expert or even not, I would call myself knowledgeable about Indigenous culture or religion, I can see, even from my small exposure, that a lot of things you're talking about are clearly universal in world religions. And, you know, what you're thinking about is ceremony, you know, has aspects of meditation, other things that where you basically want to empty yourself and become open to listening to, and you know, what they call presence, mindfulness. So anyway, a lot of that I can see has a lot of sort of universal aspects and other things that I've encountered.
Pablo, it's 9:15. Okay, great. Okay, sorry I was listening so closely. I did not prepare another question for where we're going to go. Do either of you have anything? I can think on the fly, but I'm not that comfortable leading this conversation because I actually feel like I'm sitting with two mega experts, and trying to direct which way you go is a little daunting. Well, we got 5 more minutes. Yeah, and I know that there's more things that we can talk about. I mean, one of the things that I am just curious about, and this is more like we should have a breakout somewhere at some other time, is just like how to actually facilitate conversations. That, I mean, maybe it's great to do it all in front of an audience too, but I think that for me, honestly, this is one of the few times and where we've been able to get together and have like, you know, a scientist and Wilfred in conversation after this film. One thing I want to say from my own perspective about this film that, you know, I haven't seen it in a while, and what a beautiful theater. What a great place to see it. It was such a treat. It's spectacular in here. So thank you to the Walker for having us. But just really realizing, you know, this idea of, you know, Western science or modern society, like we are a society of specialization. And when I see this film and I see the work that Wilfred does, it's about knitting things back together, in my view. And, you know, that there's the can we? Should we, you know, sort of question. And when I see the layers of community, from family to the ceremony community to the larger community, and the way that Wilfred's life story kind of expands out and takes us into his work, which to me, I can say after spending all this time, his leadership is profound. And it doesn't seem like very like wearing it on his sleeve, but I hope the film shows to some degree what it really means to be, you know, the kind of leader that I've seen. It's probably very uncomfortable for you now, right? For Wilfred at the moment. But to see that it's not about separating, it's actually about bringing things back together. And knowledge and community and healing, these things aren't all separated. And in a lot of ways, I feel like this idea of what we can take in is directly bound in who we are as people, and who we are as people is so closely tied to where we're at. Like, to empty the cup, I think you need to be in a place where you're not struggling so hard. And so these things aren't separate pieces. I see them, and in my own life, I can see that is very relevant, the idea of being able to open yourself up. There are some things that I think we have to sort through sometimes in ourselves. So to divide it out, and in that way, and this is me putting on my political hat a little bit, because I'm very class conscious, but it's like, who has the privilege of having that empty space and support network that allows them to dream about all these different things and aren't buried underneath a lot of life circumstances. And so I think one of the things that I hope the film sort of shares is that we can't necessarily parse these things out into separate pieces. And I'll stop there in case either of you want to say anything about it. It's 9:19. Sorry. I mean, if you want to say something, I'm sure we have more than a minute. I'm sorry, I haven't public. Anyway. What do you think about that, Wilfred? Have you found that? Like, you've been through so much, and I know that in your book, you mentioned that when you were young, you were ruled by physical things. This is something from your book. And then you became really driven by your emotions. And then you got into an older age and you were driven by your intellect and learning. And that now that you try to take a wider view, that you could say is spiritual. I'm not sure if you have anything you wanted to add.
Well, just again, I always have to refer back to my teachers. And they always say that everything is interconnected, and that your family, your relatives, your blood, your relations, your people, that there's a responsibility that you have in doing this thing. And with the historical trauma that happened to our people, and the colonialism that went along with that a lot of that responsibility was torn away from us. And as a young person growing up, I was basically wild in the streets. I didn't have no responsibility to nobody. I didn't have no connections to no one. And I seen people die in front of my eyes. And I seen people just waste away because nobody gave a shit. And then after that, I started realizing, this is me. I'm one of those assholes. Jeez.
That's my favorite point in the film. If you don't realize there's a jerk in the room, it's you, right?
And so, anyways, I said, well, I guess somebody has to do something. And then I looked to my my grandmother and grandfather, and what they used to do, and how they helped their relatives, how they helped their community, how they helped basically the town, and what they did. And it was so simple, just the act of kindness. My grandmother always had a big pot of soup on the stove all the time. And it didn't matter what time of day it was. As soon as in the morning, got up, she made the fire, started throwing stuff in this pot, and it stayed there all day long, and she just kept adding more stuff. And people would come in, and right away they'd be sat down, they'd been fed, they'd be given bannock, and they'd be asked to talk about what they were feeling. And this went out to the community, and people would come. And so that's what I said, okay, well, I can do that. So that's what my family and I started doing. We started reaching out to that community, and they responded. And they thought, we were doing something good. And to me, it was just, you got to help where you can. You got to help where you can. Try to be as helpful as possible, because that's the only way we get by. The only way we feel good about ourselves is reaching out and trying to be as kind as possible. And understanding, even with our children, we'll always have trouble with the teenagers. And the teenagers know damn everything, eh? And the elder said, we can't save nobody. It doesn't matter who it is. We can't save nobody. But we can listen, and we can be kind, and we can be there, and we can support. And that's what my wife had taught me with my children. to be there, to be kind, to be attentive, to listen. And that's what I try to do. I'm up here talking at a big, maybe at some kind of event like this, and I'd be yapping away. Then my daughter would walk into the room, and I'd stop and I'd go speak with her right away. And I didn't notice I was doing that till somebody actually come and told me. He said, "Hey, I like the way you do that. You just stop what you're doing. You're sitting up there talking away, and all of a sudden you stop and you go and greet your daughter." And I said, "Wow, yeah, I'm doing that." But it's things like that. And we can do that, but we can't save nobody. And so that's the process of building community. Is we can't save them. We can't go about with the savior complex saying you're going to save this whole community. When you're not. You're going to be supportive. And if they need food, you're going to give them food. If the kids need clothes, you're going to give them clothes. Whatever you can do. That's my perspective on that.
Thank you. Yeah, we're into OT now, and I just want to thank Ben for traveling to be here these last couple of nights, Wilfred for being here, the Walker, Pablo, and all the crew that put this together, and all of you for coming to this event. I have to say, Wilfred's books are really good, so you can find them online, and I really mean that. So he's got a book about the stars and a book about his life, and yeah, it's been a privilege to share the evening with you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.